Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Recording an Audiobook channel. And to start off with, I'm going to start off by introducing myself and saying my reasons for being on the panel, and then I'll pass it on to everybody else here, and then we'll go and we'll talk about whatever we want to talk to about audiobooks, and then we'll open it up for questions. So my name is Joan, and I am here because I have recorded an audiobook. I am not a professional. I'm a publisher, and I publish print books, Kindle books, and I wanted to do an audiobook. Now, I have also hired people to do an audiobook for me, and I've got 3 titles that are done that way. But then I decided I would like to record one for myself. I took an online course on how to do an audiobook. Fortunately, the instructor also was available for questions. And I recorded a children's chapter book that I wrote because it was rather short. It took me about a month. And I really needed the help of the instructor to do it, but I'll talk more about that later. So I'll pass it on to Jerry.
Hi, I'm Jerry Stearns. Can you read this? It says, sound effects a radio playground. That's a radio program that's on cable. Oh, not hearing it?
Is this one?
Okay. Where was I? Sound Effects Radio Playground, a weekly radio show on local KFAI community radio that I have hosted, let's see, in January it'll be 40 years. Wow. Yeah, I have to go back and count. But I've been on the station since 1979. I've been producing radio theater, even at this convention, for most of that time. If you saw the Big Fun Radio Fun Time, which is here at the convention before opening ceremonies, I was sitting there making noise. I have done an audiobook, but some years ago I worked for a magazine called Good Old Boat, which is a sailing magazine, and they hired me to do a sailing book. It's called Sailing Alone Around the World. It was the first of about half a dozen books they did, and apparently it was the one that sold the most, probably because it was the only book that was old enough so that everybody knew what it was. All the other ones were new. And they don't sell audiobooks anymore. But I have been involved with other people who do audiobooks frequently and have produced a few.
My name is Colette Feehan, and I am an audiobook director. So I direct people from my home over Zoom, essentially, when we're recording a book. Basically, they'll just put my Zoom audio through headphones, and then I read along while they're recording the book, and stop them whenever there are issues. So that's my main gig right now.
Okay. So we'll go into more detail about audiobooks and what you want to say about them. So go ahead and start.
Sure. So audiobooks in general, I guess. So one of the main questions I get when I tell people I'm an audiobook director, they ask, "What on earth do you do?" So my main role as an audiobook director is I'll get a book ahead of time, and I'll read through it, and I'll create a pronunciation guide. For example, think of how many times you've been reading aloud, and then you get to a word and you're like, I've never had to say this word out loud before. I don't know how to say that word out loud. So I make sure that I have pronunciations for all of those words. I also look up, particularly if it's nonfiction, I'll look up how people's names should be pronounced. So it's a lot of like searching YouTube for like random podcasts that interviewed this obscure person, and hopefully the person says their own name somewhere in the podcast. And then I also create a pronunciation guide for anything that might not have like worldly pronunciation. So if it's like a fiction book, I'll coordinate with the author team to make sure that all of the names and places and characters and things like that are being pronounced the way that the author wants them. And then I speak Spanish and I speak Mandarin, and I have a PhD in linguistics, so I also often get put on books that involve lots of different languages. So I've done a few books that were like set in Hong Kong, so it had Cantonese, Mandarin, and English throughout the book. And so I also create pronunciation guides for that, and make sure that and then while we're recording the book, I sit on Zoom and I read along with the narrator, and then and I'll stop them for anything that needs to be stopped. So like if they reversed a word, or like skipped a line, or there was like a mouth click that was really loud, or we can hear their stomach rumbling, anything like that. But then I also provide feedback on the performance. Sometimes I'll ask for a different read of something, so I think it sounds better as like a different emotion, or and then I'll also stop them for pronunciations. Or a lot of times narrators will get to the word and they'll just stop and they're like, all right, tell me what that one was.
Colette, I have a question for you.
Yes.
When you're directing it, the person who's reading it is recording it in their studio or at home, wherever they are?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can't always tell then what exactly might be a technical problem from your end.
Yes, that is true. That does get a little bit difficult.
Okay.
Usually we'll have also an audio engineer in the place where the narrator is.
Well, that's a lot of people involved in a one voice book.
Exactly. And so the audio engineer will, like, sometimes if it's something where I'm like, that might have been Zoom, I'll just like send a Zoom chat to the engineer and I'm like, did you hear that? And usually they see it like 20 minutes later. And then they'll be like, I will check at the break. But yeah, and then another thing that I do as part of my job is sometimes I do quality control on audiobooks, which is basically after we've recorded it and we've edited it, we have at least 2 people sit and just listen to the entire audiobook. And I will stop and flag anything that needs to be changed, anywhere where we need a pickup, anywhere where there are like sounds in the audio that need to be edited out. One of the big things that I end up getting asked to do for QC is, again, like books with lots of different languages, and they're like, can you just make sure that these foreign words were pronounced at least passably, please? Usually they try to just have me direct those, but sometimes the schedules don't work out, so then they'll put me on the QC.
Do you work for a company, or are you the company?
I'm the company. I am a corporation.
And do publishers hire you? Do individuals hire you? Who hires you?
The publisher hires me. I primarily work for Hyatt, and that's not really for any specific choice. It's just that Hyatt gives me enough work that I don't really need to look for other opportunities. But sometimes I do see books where I'm like, oh, this person's writing a book, but it's like Little Brown and Company or something, and like maybe I should find a contact over there so maybe I could get that book. But I haven't done that because I get a lot of work and I don't need to pursue more opportunities than I have right now.
Do you have any choice over who is the reader?
I don't have any choice, but I do have input, particularly for things that require multiple languages. They'll usually ask me, like, what should we be looking in our voice actor? And so, like, I did a book that took a really long time to do earlier this year called Tezcatlipoca. It's a book originally written in Japanese. It's a translation, and it's very gory, so if you don't like that, don't listen to it. But it's basically a family in Mexico that's like a cartel family, so there's Mexican Spanish being involved, but they're also Aztec indigenous, so there's also Nahuatl being spoken throughout the book, but then also the other like character pool that ends up connecting throughout the book is in Japan, so there's a lot of Japanese and like cartel man. also like flees Mexico through Indonesia, so there was a bunch of Indonesian and Japanese. And so, yeah, they basically looked at that book and they were like, give it to Colette, I have no idea what to do. So they were like, what do we do? Who should we get for this one? And I was like, ideally, we could find an actor who's fluent in both Spanish and Japanese. Here's an example of one that I know.
Oh, I'd like to hear that Spanish or the Japanese accent.
And then, yeah, so they'll usually ask me like, what languages would be most helpful for us to look for like fluency, and then if we can't find that, what's the next best thing? So we ended up having an absolute rock star of a voice actress, Ida Relusco, did the book, and she just absolutely killed it. It was such a difficult book. It took us way longer than normal because there were just so many different languages involved. But it was a really, really interesting and really cool project to work on.
Okay, I spend all my time with people who read audiobooks, so I haven't come across a director very often before, which means I'm always coming up with questions for you. Do you ever have to do a book that you don't like?
Yes. Sometimes, yeah, no, sometimes you get like the woo-woo, like, self-help books, but it's like most of the self-help is like, don't be poor. It's really hard to take care of yourself if you're poor. So yeah, sometimes I get books like that, and usually the author wants to read them, and the author is not particularly enjoyable to work with. So those kinds of books are not my cup of tea. Self-help books that are like actually advice, I like those. But yeah, there was one book that I actually got paid not to direct. We killed the contract on it because the author was so insufferable and would not work with our schedule. Unfortunately, we killed the contract after I had read the entire book to prepare it. But yeah, that was the big one where she was just like, just have an extra washer and dryer in your kids' room so that they can do their own laundry without bothering you. And I was like, why didn't I think of that?
Okay, go ahead.
Just a question kind of saying that the author wanted to do their own audiobook. Do you ever run into issues with like an author, for example, not being voice trained, or where you have to give them a lot of help to do the audiobook?
Even I can answer that one. For the Sailing magazine, they did half a dozen audiobooks, and at least 3 of them they wanted the author to read them, and 2 of them had no clue how to do that. So they had to train them. I worked with a partner, and he was doing the engineering for it. So he had to train them how to record it at home and then send it to him. And then he had to go back and tell them, well, I'm glad you got that far, but not a single word of it is usable. Can you do that again? They were off mic, or they were too much on mic, or they would start and stop. The cadence was, inconsistent at best. There are so many things that can go wrong with the author. In one of them, they trained the author. He figured out how to train himself, essentially. The other one, they eventually scrapped it and had to hire somebody who was better at it. So yes, that can often happen.
Yeah, I get brought in for author records a lot, particularly because my expertise is in articulatory and acoustic phonetics in linguistics. So basically, like looking at how you move your mouth parts to make specific sounds. So I a lot of times get, and I also have a teaching background. I was a teacher for a decade. They bring me in for author records where we know they're going to need a lot more support and a lot more, maybe a little hand holding and making sure that they're not pushing themselves. I think the most frustrating thing when recording an author that happens with recording an author is they just try to power through it, and they're just trying to get it done, and they're not thinking about it as like a performance of a book and a product that people will want to listen to. And so that gets me a little bit frustrated when people just think they can come in, sit down, and read a book, and then it'll be done. On average, like it takes a really long time. Like on average, a book is probably going to take it. We probably record between 10 and 20 pages in an hour. So if you have a 500-page book, that's like 2 weeks of work.
If you want to hear a really good author reading of his own book, find anything by Terry Pratchett. He is brilliant at reading his own stuff.
Joan, go ahead and give your...
I would add Neil Gaiman to that list.
Neil Gaiman, yes.
I could listen to him forever.
He does have a voice that is smooth.
Let's let Jerry go ahead and give his take on this.
Oh boy, my take. My preference is for audio theater. I prefer what they call in the business full cast, which is a very unfortunate name for that. But audio theater with actors and sound effects and music. I really prefer that. But there is a conference called the Here Now Festival in Kansas City, which is usually in June these days, which is audio fiction of all kinds, and they include audio theater and audio book and gaming audio, just started this year. So I have been to that a number of times, and I have got to hang out with some of the really best audio narrators that are out there. We ran into them and started trying to figure out what how we could get them to work for us. And my partner and I are the Great Northern Audio Theater. We come out of Minneapolis, or Indianapolis, which is where he lives. We've worked together almost 30 years and never lived in the same city, which is how we end up directing by Skype. I recorded one actor in my studio. The other end was Robin Miles, who has done probably 650 audiobooks, something like that, and won an Audi Award from the Audio Publishers Association a dozen times or better. She was in New York recording her end, and Brian, the director, was in Indianapolis directing via Skype to both of us. So it gets really complicated. But it's clear that the technology has made it possible. In fact, there are a whole lot of things now that would never have been made if that were not possible to do. So we hired Robin Miles because she was really, really good, and she's brilliant. She can do anything with her voice that you ask. The one that I recorded required French. Well, I took French in college, just enough to learn how to do a bad accent. But fortunately, I didn't have to actually speak French. I only had to make it sound like it was supposed to have been French at one time. And the word spelled leeward, L-E-E word, is pronounced leeward, I found out afterward. I guess the thing that I prefer out of all of it is the technical parts of it. I like recording it. I like getting a bunch of people together to essentially have a little party where we all talk to each other with things that we didn't write, that we didn't come there to say. We have to read it off the script. And I like making noise for fun. And I was going to say for profit, but I've been at this for a long, long time and will never make back what it has always cost me to do. I guess I couldn't say what creating an audiobook costs. So think about that as we go along. But I can say that the better and more experienced a performer you get, the better your book will be. Don't ask a friend to come over and read your audiobook for you. There's this website called LibriVox, which has a lot of audiobooks done by regular people, and they are extremely difficult to listen to. It's very rare that you will find one that is good enough to hear all the way through. Some of them are so excruciating I can't get very far into them, because it's just somebody wanting to do that and giving it a try, which I applaud. That's the fun part, recording it. It's not the fun part of trying to listen to it.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Before I take questions, I'll give my speech on recording an audiobook. As I said, I have done it. I took a course and online, and it is possible to do it yourself. I took one of my shorter books, which is a children's chapter book, which is fairly short, and I did it in about a month. I did it a little faster than our producer friend did, but I did it in about a month. I concentrated on it. There are a couple of things. You can take a course on how to do it. You can do it at home. You need to have good sound equipment. I had earphones and a microphone, and I had taken a previous course which was very good for giving me at least one good hint, and that is put the microphone between the tip of your nose and the top of your lip, and that will prevent you from doing pops when you do the letter P. For that getting on, and I found that worked well. There are some people that say, and the course that I took said, you've got to have all this sound softening equipment, and you've got to do it in your closet, and you've got to have this and that. I did it in my home office. I live in a very quiet neighborhood. I mean, when I listened to myself during the recording, there was no distracting sounds or anything. It was perfectly clear. I am an expressive reader, so I think that it's pleasant to listen to. At least people are buying it. There's the tools that you need is something called Audacity, and that you can get free. And if you have the right sound equipment, I got my headphones and the headphone and microphone assembly from Best Buy. If you know how to use Audible, you can do it. And what I did, I did my own editing. One of the important things that the course taught me is that you will always make mistakes. So be aware of that. And the course that I had showed how to correct mistakes, how to mark a mistake as you're doing it so that when you go back over the thing, you can find the mistake and cut it out. There are also, when you want to do it for Amazon's audio retailer, you have to have a very high standard. So you have to look at the various specifications that they have, and you have to be sure that Audacity is matching those specifications, or they won't take it. There are some places like Findaway Voices, you could probably get away with less than a quality recording like that, but if you're going to go through ACX or Audible, if you want it sold there, you really have to have a high standard of audio. And that's where I had to get the instructor involved, the instructor of the course involved, because the instructor said, if you have any problems, call me back. I won't charge you any extra for taking my course. Just call me, and I did. I got on email, and he walked me through it, and we finally got it to the quality that was absolutely needed. And as I said, I think I did a pretty good job. I'm an expressive reader, and people are buying it, so I guess I must have done a fairly good job. The other part of the thing is that I have hired people to do audio recordings of my book. And I was very fortunate that the first person that I had to narrate my nonfiction book, Voyager, Exploring the Outer Planets, he was excellent. He did a fantastic job. It's still selling, so I think I did well. I hired another one to do a short story of mine. And by the way, the price varies with the experience of the person who's doing it and of the length of the piece. So the short story cost me less than the Voyager book, for instance. And the only problem that I had with her is that somehow I had the word unguent in it. And somehow she just couldn't pronounce unguent. We tried a couple of times to get it right. And finally I said, just say ointment, you can say that right. Yeah, I can say ointment. So that's the only problem that I had with her. I got one of the more experienced ones to do the romance book that FPL Publications had. She did an excellent job. And my only bad experience from hiring someone was that I hired someone who supposedly had an excellent reputation and had lots of stars in the ratings of his voice and things like that, and I paid him $1,000, and when he did it, it didn't quite come out right, so I'll tell you why in a moment, but my piece of advice there is always have them do a free audition first before you spend any money, because I bought it, I paid him money on reputation only. I shouldn't have, because he was not reading correctly. He sounded like a bad imitation of William Shatner. And I'll give you an example. He would say, like, the quick brown fox run over the lazy dog. That's not how I wanted him to narrate the book. So I let him have the $1,000 of the kill fee, and we agreed mutually that he wasn't going to do it. But it is possible, so it is possible to do it yourself. It is not easy. You have to have the training. You have to, there's a lot of things that you have to consider, but it can be done. And you can also hire people. Again, it's something that you should be wise about, but you can do it. So I'll open it for questions now. So, yeah.
Suppose you're writing your first novel and you're having problems finding some publisher. Would it be a good thing to try recording it and audio recording it and selling it that way? That's one. And two, do you have to write differently for a audio recording than you do for visual reading?
No, you don't have to do anything different for an audio book than you do with a paperback book. I think that you should do the paperback. My experience as a publisher, I would advise you to do the paperback first. Paperback first, get that edited, get that published, and then seek out. First do the paperback and the ebook, and then go out for it. Don't do that first.
And I, having done this, would say almost the opposite. I have seen a number of people who published their audio version first, and then later the book came out, and people already knew about it. And the book could have more in it. I can't remember which piece it was. Well, he published the audio version of it first, and then put the text in a book that had more in it than just that audio version. So people could find either one of them, and there was more for them to find in either direction. If they found the audiobook first and then the book, oh, there's more in the book. Or if they find the book first, oh, there's an audio version, cool. And so it enhanced the sales of either one of them that way. He hired someone to read the book. But he also did a book of his own, and I still can't listen to it because he did it in this sort of, it's a kind of Southern accent, but it's in the future, so it kind of stumbles too a bit, and it's sometimes hard to understand. So for that one, I would have suggested he republish the book first, rather than try and do the audiobook. So I guess it's not exactly the opposite. That's one way, and you can think of it the other way as well.
And here's a third way. Oh.
And Harlan Ellison has always said when he writes a story, he always goes back and reads it aloud to make sure that the language is flowing properly, and he will rewrite things that are hard to say. He will rewrite things in a book that are hard to say out loud, because then it flows better when you're reading it.
It flows better when you're reading.
Yes.
Okay, but would it be better for me to write my novel in everyday conversation speech?
That depends on your novel and you. I can't tell you that.
Yeah, just a quick thing. Another option is if you're going through like a large publisher, usually they want the publication date of the book to also be the date that the audiobook comes out. So I'm usually working on books that are not released yet. And we're on a deadline to make sure the audiobook is done by the physical book's release date. So that's another way that you can do it. And then in terms of doing anything different for the audiobook, no. If we have a narrator doing it rather than the author, I will stop them to be word perfect. We want to make sure that it is, every word is the way that the author had it in the book.
And if there are mistakes in the print of the book?
If there are mistakes in the print of the book, I usually send an email and I'm like, does the author team know that this typo is here? Can you please let them know? And if we haven't gone to print yet, fix it. And then the other thing is for doing something different. The only time that we allow differences in the audiobook versus regular book is usually if we're doing an author record, particularly if it's like a memoir. And they're like, I don't like the way I wrote this. We just let them, like, if you want to change that sentence around to sound more conversational, that's completely fine. This is your audiobook, it's your product. You can adjust it how you want if you don't want it to be exactly the same as the physical book.
Okay, question, yes.
What was the name of the course you took? Do you remember?
I don't remember the course that I took the name of the course that I took at the moment.
Or the instructor?
And I don't remember the instructor. I'll tell you what, if you're interested, come up to me after the panel. I'll give you my card, and you can give me your email address. I will try to look it up and get back to you. And that goes for anybody else here that wants to know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll throw in just one little point. She was talking about Audacity as software to use for recording and editing. That's free and easy to find, and it's available for any platform, any computer you're using. Macintosh has come with free GarageBand. I kept thinking band what? GarageBand. And that is equally as easy to use and does everything that Audacity does. And if you want to add music to it, it does more because it's all built into it.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was wondering, what do you recommend to people who are interested in doing audiobook recording and don't have anywhere to start? I've heard of LibriVox before, but where would you recommend we go, or any resources that you think might be helpful?
So audiobook recording is a marathon. It is not a sprint. You are performing an entire, maybe 15, 20 hour performance. And so I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is don't sink a bunch of money into it until you get experience. You get a little bit of experience with something that's low stakes, that's not, for a big publisher and you're on some deadline and they're asking you to do all these things that you don't know how to do yet. ACX is a website that you can take it or leave it. You're going to get very variable quality from some of the narrators on ACX, but if you're looking for something where you just want to try something low stakes, you're not going to get paid a lot for it, but you're going to get a lot of experience. You're going to see if you do actually enjoy sitting and reading an entire book out loud. And then you're also going to get experience editing, because ACX, the way that it works is you are being hired not as just a narrator, you are being hired as a producer. So when you make a book through ACX, you are recording it, you are editing it, you are mastering it, you are submitting it as a full product. But you can find some pretty small self-published books where the person also is like, I don't really know anything about audiobooks, let's just work together on it. You probably can find something like that on ACX. So I think that's one area where I would direct you to. Another thing that I would also direct you to is there's a website called Gravy for the Brain. It does unfortunately require a subscription, but it's $35 to $50 depending on if it's on sale. But it has so many resources. It's got all of these course modules that you can do, all about how to do the voiceover, how to edit the voiceover, how to set up your own business, how to file taxes for contract work. So that's a really, really helpful website, and it also can connect you to a voice coach, and you can actually hire coaching and mentorship through the website. And they also each month have a Zoom social, which is pretty fun. And basically it's just 100 people on a Zoom call, and they just make random breakout rooms, and then you can network with a bunch of people. In lots of even different countries, not just the U.S. It is UK-based, Gravy for the Brain.
I want to add just briefly to something that she said about voice coaching. I did take a course in 1998 about how to improve your speaking voice, and learned a lot from that. The course, unfortunately, is no longer being offered because the Open University is shut. But in 1998, I did take a course on how to improve your speaking voice, and got a lot of pointers about that for voice. So if you find a course like that that's affordable, I would recommend that I found it interesting. I saw a question over here, so yeah, go ahead.
So audiobooks are something that I've been listening to since I was a very small child, putting cassette tapes into a boombox and flipping them over and everything. And it's so interesting because I feel like the idea of an audiobook is you read a book out loud, but it's been a thing for so long. And I'm curious from the industry perspective, what has changed over 30 years? Whether it's with technology or the practice of recording, or are there things happening right now that are innovative, either in the technology or the art of it? What's exciting right now with audiobooks?
Source Connect.
Is a very different question than what you asked before that.
But that is different. But I guess, yeah, just from the historical perspective of things evolving.
Yeah, one of the biggest pieces of technology that's really made audiobook recording very helpful is something called Source Connect, which is basically a really high fidelity way to link your home studio to a professional studio. And essentially, it's not going to glitch like a Zoom audio would, right? And it's really high quality audio that is being transmitted to the studio, and they're recording it for you in the studio. So we can have a narrator in one city, we can have me on Zoom in a different city talking to the narrator, and the narrator can be connected to the studio in LA, New York, wherever. And there's an engineer there making sure that the audio looks good and it sounds good, and we don't need to stop for whatever reason. So Source Connect is really the big one right now that has made recording so much easier, because we don't have to control for as much of the equipment that the narrator just happens to have.
For recording at home, Joan was talking about, they recommend putting foam on your walls to make sure that it doesn't reverberate in your room. And I found a little foam thing that you can get that you can mount right on a microphone stand. And it's shaped like this around you, and the mic is inside it. So when you just lean into the mic, it can't reverberate because it's foam right around you. And as long as you don't sit next to with a glass behind you or something that is reverberant, hang a towel up so that it doesn't bounce that way. That's quiet enough to do for what most people will recognize. The people in the professional studios who are listening to it are professionals. They will hear every tiny little clock tick from the next room and tell you about it. I just used, this is probably a condenser mic. Do you think it's powered? No. There are two different kinds of mics. There's one that has power coming to it, and those are made for a studio, and they're very sensitive. They will pick up everything. The kind of mics you see on the stage that the singers are singing into and swinging around on the end of a wire is a dynamic mic. They do not pick up things as clearly or as loudly as condenser mic. So
It is a cardioid condenser mic, yes.
Okay, condenser mic. Okay, so this one is powered. The dynamic mic won't pick up that clock. I have a clock in my office, and I do this radio show every week and record it, and there are no clock there, and it's like 6 feet away from my microphone because the mic's pointing in a different direction. I'm talking directly into it, so it doesn't pick up that clock.
You can also control the polar pattern, is what that's called, on a condenser mic. So, like, this is a cardioid condenser mic, which means it's picking up everything from, like, here around, but it's not picking up in the back. You can get, like, a polar pattern where it picks up on one side and the other side, but nothing on these sides, and that's for, like, if you're, like, doing an interview, that would be a good option. You can also get omni pattern, so it's picking up everything around. And then your dynamic mics are the ones that pick up just right in front of the mic.
Did I see another hand up here? Yeah, go ahead. Green card?
Well, I was wondering what your opinion on was, well, first off, about, I've heard things about the website Fiverr, perhaps, and then also about, like, the idea of maybe getting, is it necessary, do you think, to get, like, an agent to do, like, audiobooks, you think?
An agent for you being the narrator? Mm-hmm. Okay, so as the performer you want.
I don't think you need an agent, particularly starting out. I think first of all, it's going to be easier to get an agent if you already have a few credits. But also, agents can be very expensive, and you want to make sure that this is something that you think is worthwhile pursuing. It's fun. There are a lot of parts of recording an audiobook that are not fun. It's kind of a slog. You're in a closet probably, it's hot, you're cramped, and you're trying to do a 20-hour audiobook. Like, those parts of the job can be not fun. So you want to make sure that getting that finished product is worth it to you to go through the parts that maybe aren't as glamorous before you start sinking money into like an agent and representation and things like that. Websites like Fiverr, I'm not a huge fan. If anything, it's going to get you worse quality for less pay. The whole point of Fiverr is finding the lowest bidder. So they're not looking to see if you're doing what they want or you're doing quality work or whatever. They're looking for sounds good enough and is cheap enough. So I don't recommend those for like a career, but for like just getting a couple gigs to practice and see like if this is good for me. I think that's where that kind of fits into the puzzle.
I want to see ya.
So this is kind of a connection to a few other questions. Colette, you really touched on it a lot. But when you do hire narrators or voiceover talent, where do you look? Do you usually look at the website you mentioned before, or are there other places you guys look as well?
So I'm not a casting director, so I don't really look, but I know a lot of it is either from from agents and from representation. We like specifically at Hachette, I know there is like a narrator pool. So like if you've done a book for Hachette, then we have your contact information. If something comes up and we're like, we need someone who can do this, this, and this, let's look in the narrator pool and see if we already know someone who can do those things. But then also a lot of it is networking. We get a lot of our talent by saying like, we don't have anybody that we know of who does this, do you? And that's how we get a lot of our narrators.
Yeah, I went to this Here Now festival many times, and I met a lot of the people who do it, so we already knew which ones we liked, and when we had a piece that we wanted done, we went to them first. It doesn't always mean that when we started talking to them, that we find out their voice didn't quite match. It's very important to have a voice that can sound like the writing, if that makes any sense. It sounds like one of the people you hired just was not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are actors who can change their voices incredibly. If you've ever heard any of the Harry Potter books. No. Jim Dale. He's a Broadway actor, and he can do 90 plus different characters for those. And every day, the first thing he has to do when he comes in to read is go back and listen to what he's done so he can remember what the character's voice sounds like. Because he did, that was yesterday. I had to start over and figure it out again.
Yeah, a lot of...
Two of the narrators I hired, I got through ACX. The one that did the Voyager book was a person that I happen to know who narrates audiobooks. So I just happen to know a person who narrated audiobooks. But two of the ones that worked, I hired through ACX. And I do recommend ACX if you are doing this for the first time, because ACX has a safety feature, that is, they have a contract, so that it is very, very clear what the narrator's responsibility is and what the recipient's responsibility is, and that the narrator does not have any intellectual property ownership in the text. So that is very important to have, because it saves a lot of arguments in the future.
Yes, whatever you're recording, make sure you have rights to that. Don't record somebody's short story or book and then find out later that they did not like that. Howard Waldrop wrote a wonderful story called Night of the Cooters, which he was a guest at a convention here in town, and we asked him if we could do that story, and I adapted it for radio, and he got to hear it and he said, okay, that's really, really good. And it was so much fun to do. But we had to get permission way before I even decided I was going to adapt.
Yeah, just another comment on ACX. It's a website with a lot of variation. Like like you obviously, based on the one number you've said at least, you are obviously paying your narrators a reasonable amount, but other people won't. Some people do try and treat ACX like a Fiverr, where they're just looking for whoever can bid lowest and basically cheat themselves out of enough money to do the work that they're being asked to do. So as long as you are prudent with the things that you're looking for, if you get an audition and then they're going back and forth and they're seeming really flaky, like just protect yourself. You can walk away from that as long as you haven't signed any contracts yet, right? So just make sure that you are working with someone like this person here, and that you know what's expected of you, and you know that what's expected of them, and you know that you're going to be compensated fairly for the work that you're doing.
I've heard that Audible, which has a lot of audio out there, just wants it to get done as fast as you can do it. And they are less concerned with the quality of it, the quality of the reading, the recording that they worry about, the technical quality of it. But
Well, that's
the reading,
because a computer can just look at it and tell you if it was good enough or not.
yeah.
Just a side note, Google introduced earlier this year a feature where they had a bot that would read your manuscript and make it into an audiobook for free. At least the beta thing. They said maybe we'll charge later, but I tried the beta thing. It's awful. It's awful. A bot cannot do it. I mean, they went through one of the chapters in one of my novels, and it was terrible. So you really need to be aware of what's going on. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, as an avid reader of audiobooks, but not really involved in creating them or creating the content that becomes an audiobook, is there an avenue if we have a book that we want to read, but we would like to have it in audio? Is there any avenue for the public to recommend that something be recorded as an audiobook? Would that be something that we would contact the publisher, or
I would
is
say
there an avenue for that?
I would say contact the publisher. I mean, as a publisher, I would be open to somebody coming up to me and saying, I would like an audiobook of this. I think that a publisher would pay attention to that. Just approach the publisher and see what they say.
You can also approach the author.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the author is still alive.
Yeah, that's true. If the author is still corporeal.
Sometimes they're not.
Yeah. Ricardo there?
I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay, had a twofold different questions, one being more technical and one being more to the legal. With the legal, especially when you're dealing with something that has not been published, what tends to be the limitations, in terms of not just, well, I know you touched a little bit on the intellectual property, but like as far as the non-disclosure and or the data security when you're sending and receiving these files and these manuscripts, what is the life of those clauses in those contracts? And then the technical aspect, I don't know if you'll have time for later, is when you are recording these files and you're doing the audio and the mixing, do publishers and whatnot, do they prefer that you compress the files or that you keep them as raw and as large so that they can do that?
Keep them raw, WAV files or AIF files.
Mm-hmm.
Start there. Let them make it smaller if they want to. And that's where you have the best control over the quality of it too.
Yeah, definitely raw files. I think my biggest business expense since I became a corporation was a 5 terabyte hard drive because it's all raw files. We also use an FTP, which is basically just like a protected cloud storage, basically. And so we use that, and it's organized by book, so it has every book that's at that publisher. And then, but the other thing is sometimes they just email me like manuscripts, and I'm like, are we allowed to do that? I do not personally email the manuscript unless I have been asked to email the manuscript.
I got asked at the radio station when somebody was saying, my computer won't save this for me anymore. I've done this many times and this one won't save. And I looked at it and realized that she had done the original interview, then she'd put it into something like Audacity and edited it. That made a second copy of it. Then she mixed it with her introduction and such at the end. That made a third copy of it. No wonder her hard drive was full, because she had 3 copies of everything. And those can get really big. So all I had to tell her was, get rid of it after you've recorded it and you're done with it. Don't just leave it there.
And you were asking about the legal aspects, and I forgot all the details of the ACX contracts. I was mainly worried about the intellectual property thing, to make it clear that the narrator had no intellectual property claim on the text. But the files, ACX provided sufficient security for me. I can't speak for anybody else, but for security for me. And as for disclosure, the audiobooks were made of books that were already published in paper or e-books, so, non-disclosure wasn't an issue for me. So I didn't look to see if there was any part of that in the contract either. If you want to contract with someone to do it, and those are important to you, just make sure it's in the contract. So that's about all I can say about it.
I did quickly think of one other thing. Oh, the person left. That's exciting in the technology, which is I'm also an acoustician. I'm part of the Acoustical Society of America, and so there was a paper that came out maybe last year looking at moth wings and the scales on moth wings and how they basically camouflage themselves from bat ultrasound, right? From bat echolocation. And they are thinking they might be able to use, inform lighter weight and more efficient acoustic foam based on how these moth wing scales interlock and the way that they are formed. So that would be super cool. I hope it does end up happening.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I've heard that these days that fewer people are reading visually. If that's true, would that also be true of reading audiobook, or would there be more people reading audio books, listening, than people visually?
I don't know what the volume of audio and regular reading is. I know that Minnesota is very big as a book readers. I couldn't tell you how many people. I could tell you that the audiobook industry has grown steadily, and that based on podcasting, many more people are listening to things now, and it's easier to listen to them because you can do it anywhere and you don't need special equipment.
Yeah, I think definitely having the ability to have your book on your phone has really increased the prominence of audiobooks, as opposed to having to have your Walkman out to listen to the book, right?
I think we have time for one more question. Did I see somebody? Yeah.
I'm just wondering what, dream author or dream narrator, if you could work with someone you could.
I've already done it. Veronica Taylor, the original Ash Ketchum. I got to ultrasound her face for my dissertation in grad school, and then she came to my dissertation defense, which was very kind. And then, at my defense, everyone was like, "What's next?" I'm like, "I'm going to be an audiobook director," and she's like, "Maybe we'll work together sometime." And I was like, "I would literally die." And then a book came across our dash, which was a book by Daniel Dockery. Highly recommend. It's so sweet. It's called Monster Kids, and it's all about just the monster generation of media, and So what the producer called me up and was like, I have this book, it's about Pokemon, and I was like, ha ha, ha, you should get Veronica to do it. And then she was like, wait, can you make that happen? And I was like, oh my god, I could make that happen. So yes, we got her, and she read the book for us.
I could never afford him, but I would love to get Will Wheaton to narrate one of my books. He is so fantastic. If you've ever heard him as an audiobook narrator, he is just phenomenal.
And I've already done it too. Robin Miles was one we met at the Here Now Festival, and when we started writing this piece, it's called In the Embers. It's a radio play about audio. I try not to tell you the whole story of it, but we wanted Robin to play the part, and when it was done, it's an 80-minute independent audio movie, so it fits. We cut pieces so it would fit on a single CD. It won an Audie Award for Best Audio Drama from the Audio Publishers Association. So getting Robin Miles was worth it.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate it, and thank you for coming.